Now, the Empire's attention had turned to Earth, a small, vibrant blue planet on the galactic fringe. To the Empire, Earth was an afterthought, an unclaimed world that held no immediate value. Yet recent intelligence reports had flagged unusual energy signatures there, technology more advanced than the Empire believed humans could produce. Suspecting either a hidden threat or an unusual anomaly, the Empire dispatched a small squad of Wormong to investigate and eliminate any resistance that might arise. At the head of this squad was Commander Talker, a towering figure among the Wormong, his dark, chitinous armor melded seamlessly with his pale, almost translucent skin. His movements were as fluid as water, his focus unbreakable. Alongside him were three others: Arak, the stealth specialist with skin that adapted to any environment; KRYLL, the expert in combat analysis; and Mira, the youngest of them, her crimson eyes betraying an unyielding ambition to prove herself. Together, they represented the epitome of the Empire's unshakable resolve. Their ship drifted silently above Earth's atmosphere, cloaked from detection by human technology. From this vantage, the blue and green marble below seemed tranquil, defenseless, a ripe prize waiting for a victor. Talker's dark gaze was fixed on the planet's surface, already calculating their approach. "We descend at nightfall," he ordered, his voice a cold whisper across the comms. His team acknowledged without hesitation, readying themselves for the operation. They had infiltrated dozens of worlds, each mission successful, each resistance a fleeting memory. Humanity, they believed, would be no different. But their assumptions would soon be challenged. As darkness blanketed the forests of Eastern Europe, the Wormong landed undetected. Earth's night air was damp and heavy, scented with pine and soil, a sharp contrast to the sterile environments they had trained in. As they moved through the shadows, silent as wraiths, they scanned the surroundings with predatory precision. Their first objective was reconnaissance. The Empire's intelligence had marked this region as an area of military interest, likely containing pockets of resistance that would serve as a suitable test of human capabilities. To the Wormong, it was a mere formality. None of them expected the humans to pose a significant threat. And yet, as they advanced through the forest, an unsettling feeling began to take root. The undergrowth was silent, too silent, as if nature itself held its breath in anticipation. Suddenly, a soft rustle sounded to their left. Talker froze, signaling his team to halt. Eyes narrowed, he scanned the darkness, but found nothing unusual. They resumed their advance. But the silence weighed heavier now, the forest darkness thickening around them. It was then that they noticed movement, barely perceptible figures shifting in the shadows ahead. Talker's enhanced vision focused on the shapes, identifying them as human soldiers dressed in camouflage, faces smeared with dark paint, moving with a predatory grace he hadn't expected. Talker raised a fist, signaling his team to prepare for engagement. To his surprise, the humans did not panic or flee. They spread out, assuming defensive positions with practiced efficiency. Each movement was deliberate, a clear sign of disciplined training. These were not the fearful, scattered civilians he had encountered on other worlds. These were soldiers. The first exchange was swift, brutal. A flash of gunfire, the crack of branches breaking, the muffled sound of bodies hitting the forest floor. Talker's team struck with lethal force, but the humans countered with uncanny precision, adapting instantly to the Wormong's speed and strength. In seconds, KRYLL fell back, nursing a wound on his shoulder. A wound dealt by a projectile, something almost archaic compared to their energy weapons, yet alarmingly effective. "Fall back," Talker ordered, calculating quickly. This was a skirmish, not the clean sweep they had anticipated. They retreated, disappearing into the shadows, but not without a sense of disbelief. Talker's mind churned as he regrouped his squad a short distance away, replaying the brief encounter in his mind. "These humans are unpredictable," KRYLL muttered, wincing as he secured his injury. Talker nodded, his gaze distant. "They're disciplined," he replied, almost to himself. And fearless, Mira scoffed, but there was a trace of unease in her voice. Fearless or foolish, either way, they're only human. But Taka was not so certain. These humans had exhibited a level of coordination and adaptability he had not encountered before. He could sense something simmering beneath their calm exteriors, a relentless determination, an iron will that seemed to defy logic. For the first time, a flicker of unease traced the edges of his thoughts. Back at their makeshift camp, Taka's team regrouped to assess their next move. The Empire's orders were clear: eliminate all resistance. But Earth was proving to be far more formidable than they had imagined. As Tucker stared into the dim glow of his tactical display, he couldn't shake the feeling that this mission was more than it seemed. That these humans, with their raw, tenacious grit, posed a threat the Empire had never anticipated. "We proceed at dawn," Tucker announced, his tone edged with resolve. But inwardly, he knew they would need more than strength alone to emerge victorious. For the first time in his career, the Wormong commander felt the shadow of uncertainty, a subtle, insidious chill that had nothing to do with the night air. In that quiet moment, as the forest breathed around them, the unthinkable had begun. The Wormong squad had withdrawn deeper into the forest, regrouping to reassess their strategy. They had encountered human resistance, and it had been far from the primitive challenge they had expected. Under the towering trees, where the shadows lay thick and silent, Commander Tucker analyzed the data from their initial skirmish, his focus unyielding. He felt an unfamiliar pressure, an uncomfortable weight of doubt pressing against his logic. "These humans are different," he finally spoke, voice clipped and calculating. "Their tactics show a level of adaptability we underestimated." KRYLL, nursing his wound from the earlier encounter, grimaced. "Different, yes, but hardly a threat. Just clever animals with outdated weapons." Tucker's cold gaze silenced him. Clever animals do not neutralize a Wormong strike with such precision. They may be primitive, but they're not defenseless. The team had been briefed on human military capabilities, but had dismissed Earth as an inconsequential challenge. The humans had no energy-based weaponry, no shielding, no interstellar fleet. Yet somehow, they had evaded the Wormong's sensors and responded with calculated ferocity. Tucker knew that underestimating them again would be a costly mistake. He signaled to Mira, who activated her adaptive camouflage. Like a shadow, she melded into the forest, slipping forward to scout the human positions. Tucker and the others moved carefully behind her, advancing deeper into the humans' territory. As they crept through the dense brush, the forest around them fell deathly silent, save for the soft crunch of leaves beneath their boots. Ahead, the humans had set up a makeshift perimeter, a small squad strategically positioned behind natural cover. They moved with an alertness that was almost predatory. To Tucker, it was astonishing. They had no fear in their eyes, only a steely resolve and unspoken coordination. These soldiers communicated in brief hand signals, each move calibrated, every gesture subtle but purposeful. It was as though they were an extension of the land itself. Tucker studied the humans, his mind working at a relentless pace. They moved with a discipline and familiarity that suggested extensive training in guerrilla tactics. These weren't just soldiers. They were specialists honed in survival and asymmetric warfare. It was a form of combat that his Wormong training had only briefly addressed, an archaic, primitive style. Yet here in this terrain, it was proving to be alarmingly effective. A sharp whistle sounded from the right, and the humans vanished into the shadows, disappearing like smoke on the wind. Tucker's instincts flared. This was no retreat, but a carefully laid trap. He motioned to Iraq and KRYLL to prepare for a possible ambush. Mira returned from her reconnaissance, her face uncharacteristically tense. "They're baiting us," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "They're using their knowledge of the terrain to herd us into specific paths." A flicker of frustration crossed Iraq's face. "Are we seriously allowing ourselves to be led by these humans?" Tucker's expression hardened. "This is their ground. Underestimating them again would be foolish. We need to adapt, or we risk defeat. Without further discussion, Tucker directed them toward a narrow ravine, a detour that would allow them to circumvent the humans' ambush point. But as they moved, something peculiar happened. The trees around them seemed to close in, and an almost tangible tension grew in the air. Every step felt heavier, the silence oppressive, the faint rustling in the canopy like the whisper of unseen watchers. Suddenly, a hail of bullets erupted from the trees. The humans had anticipated their maneuver, shifting their positions in an ambush of their own. The Wormong scattered, taking cover as gunfire rained down from above, relentless and unyielding. Mira retaliated, her plasma weapon blazing. Yet the humans countered, evading her attacks with practiced efficiency. For the first time, Tucker felt the sting of panic within his team. KRYLL's composure fractured as he dodged behind a rock, his normally impassive face contorted in shock. Arak's camouflage flickered as he took cover, his movements jerky, less confident than before. Tucker activated his tactical HUD, eyes darting over the display as he tried to regain control. The humans were outnumbered, outgunned, yet they moved as though they had the upper hand. It was unnerving, a type of warfare the Wormong were unaccustomed to, grounded in grit rather than advanced weaponry. The attack ended as abruptly as it had begun, the humans retreating back into the shadows before the Wormong could retaliate. Silence returned, heavy and expectant, but now it was layered with a simmering, visceral tension. The Wormong regrouped, shaken, their breath coming in shallow gasps. None of them spoke, but in their eyes, Tucker saw the unthinkable. Fear. These soldiers, KRYLL began, his voice strained. They fight as if they have nothing to lose. No, Tucker corrected, his voice steely. They fight as though they have everything to protect. A deep, unsettling realization settled over him. These humans weren't fighting out of desperation. They were fighting with a purpose, a relentless, implacable will to defend their world. It was a motivation the Wormong had never encountered. For all their skill and power, they were mercenaries, tools of the Empire. These humans, however, were bound by something stronger, a connection to their home, their people, their very identity. Tucker straightened, his gaze hardening. We underestimated them. That ends now. He gathered his team, reinforcing their strategy with an uncharacteristic gravity. They would need to abandon the methods that had carried them through countless other missions. Against these Green Berets, brute force would be useless. They would have to think like their adversaries, learn from them, and most importantly, respect them. As dawn began to break, casting the forest in a pale, eerie light, Tucker felt a quiet resolve settle within him. The humans had awakened something within him, a realization that his own loyalty, once thought unbreakable, was far more fragile than he had imagined. We're not leaving this planet until we've accomplished our mission, he declared, though a trace of doubt edged his voice. These humans may be resilient, but we are Wormong. We adapt. We endure. And yet, as they prepared to push forward, each of them knew this mission was no longer a mere extermination. It had become something else entirely. An ordeal that would test their limits, shake their convictions, and perhaps, for the first time, force them to confront what it truly meant to face an enemy they could not underestimate. The morning mist clung to the forest like a shroud as Tucker's team advanced, their steps calculated, every nerve taut with anticipation. Overnight, they had adapted their approach, discarding their reliance on superior weaponry and cloaking. Now, they moved with a careful precision, studying the terrain and attempting to think like their opponents. It was a method foreign to them, a battle fought as much in the mind as in the field. But these Green Berets had forced their hand. Commander Tucker led the team, his movements uncharacteristically measured. He had come to respect these human soldiers, though he kept that realization buried. It was respect edged with frustration, a grudging acknowledgement of the human's resolve that was forcing him to question everything he knew about war, about conquest, and about himself. Through the trees, Talker spotted movement. A lone figure crouched behind a fallen log, scanning the area with careful intensity. The human's face was smeared with camouflage, his expression fierce, yet composed. There was no hint of fear, only focus. Talker's heart pounded, a new sensation edging into his awareness. For the first time in his career, he was stalking prey that felt like his equal. Without a word, Talker signaled to Mira, who moved silently into position, her gaze locked on the soldier. But just as she raised her weapon, the human's head snapped toward her position, as if he'd sense her presence. He ducked down, issuing a quick hand signal. In an instant, two other soldiers appeared out of nowhere, their rifles trained on Mira. "Fall back!" Talker barked, his voice low but urgent. Mira obeyed, but not before the humans opened fire. She barely evaded, the bullets chipping bark and earth around her as she retreated. The humans were relentless, advancing with a fearlessness that was as exhilarating as it was unsettling. Talker's team, trained to inspire terror, was now on the defensive. The firefight escalated, both sides moving through the forest in a deadly dance of evasion and pursuit. The Green Berets didn't let up, their movements swift and strategic, funneling the Wormong into unfamiliar terrain and forcing them to react. Talker could sense the strain in his team, the mounting tension breaking through their disciplined exteriors. KRLL's movements grew less precise, Iraq's breathing heavier, their confidence eroding under the weight of this relentless, tenacious assault. Just as the Wormong regained their footing, the humans unleashed their next maneuver. Smoke grenades exploded in a sudden barrage, cloaking the area in a thick, disorienting fog. Talker's vision struggled to pierce the dense haze, his usual sense of superiority splintering as he heard footsteps closing in around him. He activated his thermal scanner, but the humans had anticipated that, keeping low to the ground and evading his sensors. An explosion sounded nearby, shaking the forest floor. Iraq stumbled, his camouflage flickering as he fell back, stunned. Through the smoke, Talker saw a human soldier emerge, advancing toward them with a look of fierce determination. This soldier, though young, radiated a calm intensity that sent a chill through Talker. He moved with a purpose, as if each step carried the weight of something larger than himself. "Hold position," Talker shouted, rallying his team. They regrouped, instinctively closing ranks, forced to rely on one another in a way they hadn't before. Mira's gaze met his, and in her eyes, Talker saw the flicker of uncertainty that had infected each of them. For the first time, he understood the humans were fighting with a fire they lacked, an unbreakable bond to their home, a conviction that no amount of fear or intimidation could fracture. The fog began to dissipate, and through the thinning smoke, Talker saw the humans advancing once more, methodical and unyielding. He knew his team couldn't retreat. Their mission required them to eradicate these humans, to prove the Wormong's superiority. But now, the mission was no longer about obedience or duty. It had become personal. With a fierce resolve, Talker surged forward, his blade gleaming as he closed the distance with the lead soldier. The human responded instantly, pivoting with impressive speed, blocking Talker's strike with a strength that belied his size. They engaged in a swift, brutal exchange, each movement honed, every action deliberate. Talker felt an unexpected thrill, a battle unlike any he'd fought before. The others followed suit, engaging the Green Berets in close combat. Each clash was raw, visceral, a brutal testament to both sides' endurance. KRYLL grappled with a soldier who countered every move, his skill forcing KRYLL to adapt or perish. Mira found herself outmatched by a veteran with steely resolve, her movements slowing as exhaustion crept in. The fight grew grueling, neither side willing to concede an inch. Talker's breaths came in harsh gasps, his body aching, his mind sharpened by a clarity he hadn't known he possessed. In the midst of the chaos, he recognized a fundamental truth. This was more than a battle of bodies and tactics. It was a battle of wills, of beliefs forged in the fires of loyalty, honor, and survival. But the humans' resolve was unshakable. With a final surge, they pushed back, driving the Wormong into a defensive stance. For the first time, Tucker saw defeat glinting at the edges of his vision. He could feel it in the sag of KRL's shoulders, in the blood trickling down Mira's face, in the grim realization that these humans were willing to fight to their last breath. The Wormong retreated, vanishing into the forest, wounded and shaken. Tucker's pride chafed, but he knew they had met a force unlike any they had encountered. These humans, these Green Berets, were not mere soldiers. They were warriors bound by something the Wormong could not replicate or even fully comprehend. As the echoes of battle faded into the forest stillness, Tucker and his team regrouped, silent and humbled. He looked at his squad, their eyes filled with a mixture of respect and exhaustion, the spark of doubt now firmly embedded within each of them. "We report back to the Empire," Tucker said, his voice steady but low, carrying the weight of a new understanding. "And we will remember this day." The others nodded, though their expressions were solemn. They had glimpsed humanity's indomitable spirit, a force that transcended technology or physical might. As they turned to leave, Tucker knew that Earth had changed them irrevocably. They would carry the memory of this battle, a bitter reminder that the galaxy held forces the Empire had grossly underestimated. The Wormong ship drifted silently into orbit, Earth's blue surface fading as the vessel moved farther into the void. Inside, Tucker stood on the bridge, watching the planet shrink beneath him. His mind churned with the memories of the recent mission, those Green Berets, whose grit had tested the limits of his team and left a lasting mark on his own sense of purpose. Beside him, KRYLL, Iraq, and Mira remained silent, each lost in their own reflections, still reeling from the toll that brief but intense encounter had taken. For the first time since they had joined the Empire's ranks, the Wormong had tasted the bitterness of retreat. Their wounds were healing, but the experience had shaken them. They had been trained to conquer without question, to face the galaxy's fiercest without ever doubting the outcome. Yet here they were, leaving Earth humbled, bruised, not only in body but in spirit. Tucker activated the ship's holo display, bringing up the mission report. The Empire would want an explanation for their failure to eradicate the human threat. He considered the words carefully, knowing that his report would not only reflect on his team, but also frame humanity in a way that could seal its fate. "Our mission met with unforeseen resistance," Tucker began, his tone measured as he chose his words carefully. "The human combatants, designated Green Berets, displayed combat capabilities beyond standard expectations. They fought with a resilience that merits further study." He paused, the weight of his statement settling heavily. "Recommendation: cease immediate hostile engagements with Earth and conduct extended reconnaissance." KRYLL glanced up, surprise flickering in his gaze. "Commander, are you suggesting we delay the Empire's expansion into Earth?" Tucker nodded. "If we attempt a full-scale invasion now, these humans will fight with every resource they have. They may lack our technology, but their resolve compensates for it. They are not a simple foe." Iraq scoffed, though his skepticism felt hollow. "The Empire doesn't negotiate with primitives. We have annihilated species far more advanced. These humans are different," Tucker replied quietly. His voice held no defiance, only a weary conviction. "They are bound to their world, to one another, by a loyalty and spirit that runs deeper than we imagined. A full assault may achieve conquest, but it will come at a cost the Empire may not be prepared for." His words lingered in the air, filling the silence with an unspoken question, one that weighed on all of them. If the Empire continued its advance, would they face an enemy that would refuse to yield, no matter the cost? The thought unsettled them, and for the first time, the Wormong felt the precarious weight of the Empire's expectations upon their shoulders. Tucker continued to report, concluding with an assessment of humanity's tactical resilience and capacity for guerrilla warfare. As he sent it off, he felt a strange sense of resolve. A decision, subtle yet powerful, had been made. His loyalty to the Empire remained, But something had shifted, a fissure opened by the encounter with the Green Berets. He could not deny the respect he felt for the humans, nor could he dismiss the thought that this encounter had changed him irreversibly. After a long silence, Mira spoke up, her voice quiet but steady. "Commander, if the Empire decides to attack Earth regardless of our report, what will we do?" Taker's gaze met hers, a flicker of something uncharacteristic in his expression. "We follow orders as always, but we remember what we have seen here." His tone softened, a shadow of something almost like admiration. "These humans are survivors. Whatever the Empire decides, they will endure." As they neared the galactic transit point that would take them back to the Empire's core, Taker called up a final visual of Earth. The planet gleamed, its oceans catching the light of its sun, a serene image that belied the fierce strength of its inhabitants. He could almost imagine the Green Berets below, watching the skies, waiting for the Empire's next move with the same relentless determination they had shown in the forest. Taker turned away from the screen, a faint, almost imperceptible smile crossing his face, a rare gesture almost foreign to him. The mission was a failure by the Empire's standards, but he felt no shame. For the first time, he understood that there were forces in the galaxy stronger than any empire or weapon: loyalty, grit, and the fierce love of a people for their home. Forces that no conqueror could ever truly vanquish. "We are Wormong," he said, more to himself than to his team. "We were made to fear nothing, to endure without question. But perhaps fear, perhaps humility, these things are not weaknesses." The others listened, their expressions thoughtful, caught between the rigid loyalty they had been bred for and the strange sense of reverence that Earth and its defenders had inspired. Each of them had felt it in the heat of battle, the unbreakable will of the Green Berets who had fought, not for glory or conquest, but for something far more profound. As the ship began its jump sequence, the void surrounding them deep and cold, Taker allowed himself a final thought, a silent, unspoken promise. He would remember this encounter. He would remember these humans, these Green Berets, who had challenged him and emerged victorious not through strength alone, but through a spirit that transcended any technology or training. And if the Empire came for Earth again, if they ordered him back to lead the charge, he would remember what he had seen. He would remember that there was a world on the edge of the galaxy where people would rise to defend their home with a fierceness and unity no empire could ever command. As the stars blurred around them, stretching into streaks of light, Taker knew this mission would haunt him long after he returned. He could only hope the Empire would heed his warning, for if they did not, the humans would be ready. And this time, the Wormong would not face mere primitives. They would face warriors who fought with their hearts, their lives, and the unyielding conviction that they could and would resist.